One of the most fascinating things about life is that there are things we still don't know. There are mysteries that are unsolved, except for these ones have been, and you didn't even know about it. Elisa Lam was born in British Columbia in 1991. At 21 years old in 2013, she was a university student at the University of British Columbia. A very intelligent and very enthusiastic young woman, she started a blog on Blogspot in 2010, and she focused mostly on fashion, but brought up as a reoccurring theme her own mental illness, in an attempt to help others if they might be suffering from the same thing. To take a break from her studies, in January of 2013, Elisa went to California. She toured zoos in San Diego and other areas around Southern California, and then she arrived in Los Angeles. This was on January 26th, and then in the coming days, she checked into the Cecil Hotel. The Cecil Hotel already had a reputation for debauchery, drugs, bad behavior, prostitution, and even called the suicide online. In the 1950s and 60s, there was a string of suicides, and this continued onto the time when Elisa checked into the Cecil Hotel. This entire area of Los Angeles, very close to Skid Row, is not the greatest place for tourists. This is a place where you go where there's nowhere else to go. Based upon the accounts of Elisa before her death, it was thought that this was very unusual for her to go to a place like this. This is an outstanding university student, somebody who likes to read, who likes culture, staying in a place that has none of that. Further out of character, in January, Elisa went to a taping of the show Conan in Burbank. This in itself wasn't weird, but the fact that she got kicked out and removed from the premises for acting in a way that was so disruptive she couldn't be there, that definitely was out of character. And Elisa did call back home to her parents in British Columbia every single day. Her parents didn't make any mention of her acting weird or suspicious in the days leading up to a very particular event. But those phone calls stopped on January 31st, the day that Elisa was supposed to check out of the Cecil Hotel. Her parents couldn't get a hold of her, they called LAPD, and the Los Angeles Police Department searched every inch of the Cecil Hotel that they could within their legal bounds. There wasn't a crime committed, so they couldn't go into every single room, but they did check thoroughly. There was no sign of Elisa anywhere. Once they brought in dogs, they lost her scent in many places, but one particular place was at a window where it seemed like there was nowhere to go. But Elisa wasn't found hanging from the window, on a ledge, on a fire escape, or down below. She was just gone. By February 6th, the police and people looking for her put out flyers. There were search parties looking all over the place, asking everybody that they could find, have you seen Elisa? Showing pictures of this young woman who was supposed to return home in the following weeks. But this revealed nothing. And then on February 13th, now 2 weeks after her disappearance, after the last time somebody saw her, the police department released this, the elevator tapes. This is some of the most spooky and haunting footage, or at least it would seem to be, that you'll ever see. In the video, you can see at odd hours, Elise in an empty elevator just by herself, acting very suspicious, acting as if there was somebody else. She was speaking to somebody who wasn't there, or maybe looking to get away from somebody who we can't see in the video. Over 2 minutes and 30 seconds of very strange behavior, Elise pressing all of the buttons in the elevator, and then she leaves, but the doors don't close, and she's never seen again. After the release of this video, it was revealed that Elisa is bipolar, and that is a huge break because it kind of explains what we saw in that video. Perhaps she was drugged, or she took drugs herself, or perhaps she wasn't taking the drugs that she was supposed to, and she was having a psychotic episode. That mystery would be solved the following days. On the 19th of February, patrons of the Cecil Hotel mentioned that they had water issues. Water pressure wasn't what they expected. There was a weird smell or taste to their water, and when a maintenance man went up to the roof and checked one of the 4 1,000-gallon water barrels that is on the roof of the Cecil Hotel, there she was, face up, completely naked, and no longer responsive. She had been dead for a while. Elisa's body was taken in, toxicology was run, and it appears as though there were no illicit drugs in her system at the time. Of course, this is just a theory because those drugs could have been broken down by the water, by the decomposition of the body. There was nearly no alcohol found in her system, and the only drugs they could find in substantial quantities, is substantial enough to actually get a reading from, were ibuprofen and Sinutab. Both of these are over-the-counter pills, and it seems like those would not be the cause. What you'd expect to find was her prescription medication for bipolar, but there was only trace amounts. The theory is she stopped taking her meds. She went into a psychotic break. That's what you see in the elevator footage. The scent was lost by the dogs at a window, which then you can get to a fire escape from, which leads right up to the roof. And although the lids should be very difficult to remove on these water vessels, 2 of them were ajar. And when the maintenance man went up to look on the roof, he found that the one that she was in, the lid was already half off, which explains how she would have got into the container, but the water level was such that there's no way that she could get out, even if she wanted to. The conclusion wasn't suicide, but instead a psychotic break. She didn't know what she was doing, she was panicking, she got into a place that she couldn't get out of, and that was it. She drowned. Moving on to something that likely will never inspire a horror film, but instead just pique your curiosity, the Sailing Stones of Death Valley. Death Valley is a very interesting place. This is a park close to the Nevada border in California. Its claim to fame is the ridiculous temperatures that it can hit. The record for the hottest air temperature anywhere in the entire world was set in July in 1936 in Death Valley. Just this week, I checked the temperature for later in the week. 48 degrees Celsius is what it's going to be on Thursday. The reason is, it is a very low point. It's below sea level, and right around it, imagine a bowl. And deep inside that bowl, that is where Death Valley is, which means that when the wind changes, the wind sails right over the top of Death Valley. And sure, you'll get some wind inside, but it'll stagnate that air, and that air is going to remain there and get very, very hot. Now, of course, because it is the desert, at nighttime, the air cools off. And oftentimes in deserts, just to simplify this, the air temperature will cool off, and so will everything else. In the desert, during the day, you can definitely die of heat stroke and other ailments attributed to very hot temperatures, but you can also freeze to death at night. A very famous case of this is former UFC fighter Evan Tanner, who tragically died decades ago in the desert, just couldn't get out on time and he froze to death. Why this is interesting is because in Death Valley there are stones. 700-pound stones, some of them giant, much bigger than a human could move. And they seem to sail, to move on their own, sometimes in the winter. And when they move, they leave a trail. This is in a part of Death Valley called Racetrack Playa. And the reason that they move, and this is a very new theory that was shown to be true, is simply water. That's it. Because water freezes, but you would never expect water to be in one of the driest places, the driest place, in fact, in all of North America, and the hottest place on Earth. But in the winter, sometimes rainfall will accumulate. The playa won't soak it up like you'd imagine where you probably live, so it'll settle there. And at night, sometimes it'll freeze in the winter. This creates a thin sheet of ice. Then the thin sheet of ice starts to break up, fragment, and melt when the sun hits it in the morning. And because there is ice underneath some of these boulders, when the breeze whips through, it'll move everything that goes along with it, including the boulders that are now basically on ice skates. The reason that it took so long for people to figure this out is because they move so slow, it's almost impossible to see with your eye. Former theories, aliens, algae, things like that, but it turns out it's just high quality H2O frozen and then moving them along, and that ice, which is the secret, disappears before anyone can see it. For our third entry today, we'll really simplify it. That is the entire point of informal history: take big, broad, important topics and shrink them down bite-sized so everyone can understand. The Mayan culture is one of the most interesting in all of history. It's my favorite history to study. It's a Mesoamerican culture, rich in history, powerful and successful. Not only that, but the culture was absolutely amazing and unique. This culture was around for thousands of years. We don't know exactly how long, but this could date back as early as 7000 BC. But all of a sudden, before the year 1000, sometime between 6, 7, 8, 900 CE, this kind of disappeared, more or less, for the most part. Imagine sprawling cities, the most amazing things that you've ever seen, this culture that can only be imagined in movies today because there is nothing left to study, well, until recently that is. There have been many theories of why this culture disappeared so relatively quickly, but what it turns out to be is weather patterns most likely being the most of the cause. Simply, weather patterns change, and whether this was natural or because so much of the forest was changed that weather patterns followed along with it, the precipitation oftentimes is dependent on how much moisture is wicked from the air, and wind patterns as well. Not to really get into a broad topic and discussion about that, but scientists theorize that weather patterns changed, caused an excessive drought, and because of that, these giant cities that you can't transport, this isn't a hunter-gatherer community, everybody had to leave. The soil erosion couldn't be changed, couldn't be fixed. So all of these crops that these massive cities of millions of people, some of them depended upon, just couldn't be fed anymore. And these civilizations had to move. And this created the collapse of the Mayans. Let me know in the comment section below, would you like to hear more mysteries that were solved that you didn't know about? Which ones of these did you actually know about? Let me know in the comment section. And as always, please hit the like and subscribe button. Really helps the channel. We're trying to grow this one too. And I do videos every weekend. So that means I'll see you in the next one.